Welcome to the International Classroom Podcast, where we explore the world of education through a global lens. As a teacher, you know that every student has unique needs, experiences, and perspectives, and we believe that a global perspective is key to creating an inclusive and effective classroom. In each episode, we bring you insights and discussions from experts and educators around the world, sharing their experiences, the challenges, and solutions in the classroom. Whether you're a student, a teacher, or anyone interested in education, we invite you to join us on this learning journey.
And they had an article, and I forget exactly what it was titled, but they were basically presenting ChatGPT, as a new search engine. Where it's going to affect me is really how it's going to affect a lot of people. And I just thought I have a lot of opinions and ideas on it. So I just kind of got really involved in it. Like everything all the students turn in, any advice you get from a friend, anything you find on the internet, it's always right. Like, the FDA approved drugs that have the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, they're like 90% effective.
Now, before we get into today's episode, make sure to follow us on your favorite streaming sites to stay up to date on our latest episodes. If you're watching this on Deep Teaching on YouTube and you've yet to, please subscribe. We've been fortunate enough to have some fantastic guests on, so please do share this with your colleagues and friends and let us know who you'd like us to speak with next. Stefan, thank you ever so much for joining me on the International Classroom Podcast today. I'm very predictable in how I start my questions for every podcast at the moment. It is, who are you and what do you do?
Hi, Alex. Thanks very much for having me. I'm excited to be here. By trade and how I've spent most of my life and continue to work is as a debater and a debate coach. The debater part you can probably understand. You've probably seen debaters, in high school or college. And I started doing that in 1984 when I was in middle school. And I've been doing it ever since. And if you calculate that out, yes, I'm about to turn 52. So I've been doing this for quite a long time. I stopped debating, though, in a formal sense, around 1994 when I finished my undergraduate and I became a graduate student at Wake Forest University, and they had a program there where, you could go to school for free if you were a debate coach. Wake Forest just a few days ago won the college national debate tournament. That's a big debate program and a big success. And I happened to stop down there and see a couple friends before it started. But I have been involved in debate ever since as a coach. I've coached at the college level. I've coached at the high school level. I've even now coached some elementary school students in a modified format. And I've helped build debate programs both in the U.S., and other countries. Built a pretty big one in China. That we're working on again now in some other parts of East Asia, and actually had started a little bit of one in the UAE before the pandemic, and then it didn't quite take off from there. So I've been involved in that, forever, and I love it. I love working with the kids. I love developing the programs. I'm working with the New York City Urban Debate League, which is a program for students of lower socioeconomic means currently. How did that lead to my interest in generative AI? Well, I was actually about to start a debate meeting with some high school students, and I was kind of waiting for it to start, and I was just playing around on the internet, and I was looking at the New York Post. This was in New York, and they had an article, and I forget exactly what it was titled, but they were basically presenting ChatGPT, as a new search engine. Okay, well, we can argue about whether or not that's the best metaphor, but so I clicked on the article and I read it and said, wow, this is like really interesting. And I signed on to it, and I just did like a really basic thing. I said, tell me 10 reasons socialism is bad, just like an old fashioned debate topic. And it just listed all the reasons. And I thought, wow, these are like some of the main arguments, right? If you were to have a debate about this is kind of some of the main points that would be made. So I got pretty interested. I could barely even concentrate really, honestly, in debate class because I was so excited to come back and try out the search engine. And then I tried it a little bit afterwards. And I thought, wow, this really has a lot of potential, to use. And it's really not just potential to use, but I thought, well, this is really going to impact my field because I picked up right away, gee, this could write speeches for students, right? It could write speeches. It could generate argument ideas. I didn't really understand then at the time, well, is it connected to the internet, right? I mean, it is in the fact that I'm using it on the internet, but is it connected to the internet in terms of finding current research? I didn't understand all that at the moment, but I really saw that it had a lot of potential to either positively or negatively impact my life, as a debate coach. I guess I was a little selfish, but I thought, wow, this is really going to have a pretty big impact. And then, over the holiday towards the end of December and that, I played around with it. I wasn't like, I didn't spend all my time on it. But then once the schools started banning it, I got really, really interested in this because I kind of had like a gut reaction. I was just like, this is really like not a good idea. And, I knew a few of the people and I talked to in the education technology space. So one of them I've known for like 15 years. And he even told me, he said, a lot of the schools, they kind of thought this was a good idea, but, he was very nice. And, he shared a post I wrote about why it shouldn't be banned. We had a good dialogue. But he said, a lot of schools kind of thought it should be banned. So that's kind of really what got me involved in the conversations, and then starting to really fully think about what this would mean for debaters and the way they do assignments, the way they prepare, they use quotations. Then I started thinking about how this is really going to affect like all the humanities at a minimum. Right. And then I started thinking, okay, well, even into the sciences, even like coding, that's become like one of the biggest use cases. So, that's something that's kind of off my field, but I was like, excuse me, this is going to have like a really dramatic effect. And sometimes I can get really into topics. Like, so last fall, I've been in debate so long, a lot of these things, they kind of come back and forth. We've been debating about Russia and NATO and China and Taiwan. And, so some of these issues kind of repeat themselves. Sometimes there's something new. So last fall, there was cryptocurrency. There was cryptocurrency regulation topic. And I knew like a little bit about cryptocurrency, not much, Web3, like NFT. I kind of knew a little bit, but I just started reading a lot about it. It was a very bad time to learn a lot about it and try to invest money into it because that was basically the peak and then it crashed. So, I learned some things the hard way, but I kind of got into that. And then it was more like something really, really interesting and also something really, really related to everything I do, like, in education, even though I'm not a teacher. I'm not like, a department head or a principal where, I'm like kind of responsible for maybe this how it's going to impact a whole school. I'm not a superintendent and how this is going to affect my entire district. But where it's going to affect me is really how it's going to affect a lot of people. And I just thought I have a lot of opinions and ideas on it. So I just kind of got really involved in it.
There's some things that you've said there I'm really fascinated in terms of exploring in this conversation we're going to have. But just the last thing you've said, I want to unpack that a little bit further in terms of how you think AI and ChatGPT, generative AI, is going to impact you and impact everyone else. Let's just explore that. How do you think it's going to have those effects?
One of the things I kind of realized right away was that beyond what was there, it had a lot of potential. And I think, and even today, not as much, but even today, and I mean today as compared to 30 days ago or 60 days ago, a lot of the way people would criticize it is like for what it couldn't like do, right? It would say like, gee, you can't get sources from the internet, or like here, like, I'm going to prove, like I'm going to trick it and get it to give me the wrong answer to a math problem. Right. Or, I'm going to get it to generate a false bibliography. I don't know if that was like people just being defensive as humans, like, hey, there's something I can do like better than this system. But what I started to see was that it was going to become more of what it is. Like even back in January, I said, look, all they have to do to solve the math problem, and I envisioned it a little bit differently, but I said, well, someone will just build an enterprise system that incorporates this, and they'll put in a calculator, and which they basically did, right, with the Wolfram, and someone, and I didn't understand, all the business relationships at the time, but I said, they could just partner with like Google Books and Google Scholar and like integrate all the articles, and then we would have the articles, or they could just simply also let it search the internet. So I kind of saw like immediately where this was probably going to go, not in exactly the way it did, right? I didn't know about the relationship with Microsoft at the time. And, I was kind of happy because I was chatting with this person who was actually, I was surprised he kind of wrote me back, because because I'm a debate coach, they're like, well, you're not an education technology guy. They look at my profile and they just like blow me off. But other people, they do engage me. And this guy, he used to basically had some really senior position at Facebook. In machine learning. And he's like, he listened to some of the stuff he said, and he said, well, yeah, you're right. He's like, it's a little more complicated than just putting in a calculator, but yes, that can easily be done. And, it can solve the math problem. So I think that made a lot of sense. So then I was thinking, okay, well, in debate, a lot of what students do to prepare is they write speeches and they do a lot of research. and they find evidence. Now, there's different kinds of evidence in the world, right? Like there's visual evidence. There's all, we could talk about all the different kinds of evidence for things. But in debate, you're basically using a quotation. You're basically referencing an expert. Now, sometimes it's an expert quoted in a source. Sometimes it's an expert who wrote an academic article. Sometimes, expert is just like Time Magazine or something like that, right? Especially on the levels of debate that you're at. And I'm thinking, wow, this can easily find quotes, right? It's easily going to be able to find quotes. They're eventually going to connect it to this other databases. It's going to pull in the quotes, and it's going to be able to write the speeches. And that was my first thing, and that's already happened. We had a junior in high school who's a debater. He figured out how to do this like in early February with one of the Chrome extensions. And in a class we were teaching for debate coaches, he was showing them how the students could basically take the evidence and put it in. Was it the best evidence in the world? Like, not really. It was kind of short. It was like one sentence. It was mostly from the media. But again, potential. What is going to happen here? Where is this going to be, in 6 months? So I started kind of seeing that. Okay. And then I was thinking, okay, I'm not teaching. I haven't taught in a while, but I work with students. I see what kind of stuff they have to do. I've seen my own son's college syllabus, his high school syllabus is like all the way through. I went to school, right? What are common assignments in the humanities? Here's a topic, or pick a topic, right? Like a research paper with like X number of sources and, like this basic structure. And okay, like all those assignments, the computer either, I'll just say it, broadly, the computer, one of these tools, a generative AI tool, either can do or will be able to do very shortly. And, with the new Bing, I started playing around with this. This is in the chapter. And then same with the student I was working with, the debater, we were able to basically get Bing to write some basic speeches about some topics, incorporate some evidence. Would it win, the highest level of like college debate? No. If we had debates between sixth graders and they turned up with that stuff and I didn't know how they got it, I'd be incredibly impressed, right? And then along there you have the continuum, and the continuum is being impacted by as the technology develops, right? So like a year from now, right, can it do what even the better debaters can do, the better college students, what they could do in maybe, what I'll call a 200 or 300 level course in college, right? Those don't all have the same numbers, but as my son's gone through the progression, he's a sophomore now, he had 100, 200, 300 level, international relations major, right? So something that this is quite apt for, right? Is it going to be able to write those papers? Like, of course. And that's just a reality. And is it going to be obvious that a machine wrote them? Probably not. It is now, I think, if you understand, you have to have used this technology, right, to understand like how it writes and what it's doing. But, one of the things, is interesting. Turnitin came out the other day with like another plagiarism checker. Okay, congratulations. I was kind of pretty nonplussed. But when I started reading about this stuff early on, I saw a quote from their Asia director. And it said, look, in 2 years, we're not going to be able to tell whether this was written by a machine or a student, whether we use a piece of technology or we don't, because it's going to be able to write in their own voice. And everyone will say that, like even I can't pronounce his name, the CEO of Google, Pinochet, I think, something like that. He basically said the same thing. In 2 years, these tools are, and then you can read more interesting things about like how you'll be able to develop your own digital twin. Right, your assistant will just be like you. It'll be able to write like you, think like you. Who knows exactly when this stuff's going to play out? Maybe it'll be in 6 months. Maybe it'll be in 3 years instead of 2. But that's all coming, right? And I think we need to start thinking through like what that means for education. Like I say, debate's kind of a microcosm, but it's kind of basically a humanities, and the instruction is similar. How the students do it in a competitive format is a bit different, which I think is really kind of cool. But
it's interesting. I'll come back to the debate part because I'm fascinated by that because we never did anything like that in school. But actually, what you've said there is that the whole concept of AI in education is up for debate. And for me as an educator who's on LinkedIn and speaking to a lot of people, and I would consider myself an early adopter, we've kind of had that a little bit in common. And there's a lot of educators out there that don't know a lot about it or don't know how to use it. I mean, there's a lot of educators still who don't really know how to use technology. From even coming out of pandemic, we've kind of reverted a little bit back to what was prior to that and how we taught and how we delivered, and people are comfortable with that. And so to have these conversations now, and I saw something on LinkedIn earlier today, and the person was talking about, right, we're going to need to use this to redesign redesign education and AI for these assessments. And, one of our sort of acquaintances in common with Leon, when I spoke with him recently, talked about, one is about the scaling of this technology. Like you said, we're 6 months into it, and look how fast it's scaled and what it's going to go to, but also about equity and equality. There are hundreds of thousands of students that will not have access to this technology, and their teachers don't have it or don't understand how to use it. And we're kind of having this at the moment. We're assuming that everyone's on the same playing field, and we're not. We are poles apart, aren't we?
Yeah, I think, and I've started to see some gaps like emerge, and, these things are hard to get data on, right? Because, we just started using it. But there's a couple of the gaps I see emerging, right? Like I see a gap between, and this one's probably the easiest to solve, between high school and like universities. Within universities, professors kind of have strong opinions about whether to use this or like not to use it. But the reality is like a good chunk of them are, and they're like trying to figure out how to teach their students to use it. They're proactively engaged. Students are using it in classes. One of my friends, who's actually my former debate partner in college, Anand Rao, who's one of the editors of the book, he immediately started integrating it to a senior seminar that he was teaching so that when the students graduated, they would be familiar with the technology. I also received a call from a friend who knew I was familiar with this, who basically said her department asked her to find the most effective plagiarism detection tool and buy it for the department. And it was kind of looking for some advice. And I've had that advice from people in K-12 as well. So, but there's kind of a gap between what kids are learning in K-12, especially the upper grades now that, university is more relevant to them, right? And what they're doing in university. Then I also see a gap between what's happening in public schools and what's happening in private schools. More just because more of the public schools have banned it, because they do have more procedures for adopting, managing things, right? Like there's all these like considerations, there's union questions, right? Versus like private schools. And in some instances, there already was a gap, right? Like between those. So I think those are two areas that the gap's emerging. Then I think there's gaps between whole entire countries, right? That are not even like the technology is like not even available. Like, right? Like chat, that's not this isn't the only LLM, right? But it's the most dominant and the most, I would say, useful one at the moment, right? It's the most accurate. We could talk about those kind of things, right? But it's not accessible like in many countries, and kids have to get on with VPNs, which I ultimately find ironic. Like you have educational institutions in the U.S. who are like blocking it, and then you have educational institutions in especially a lot of developing countries that are like begging for it and wishing they could access it. And I think when you talk about access, the other thing that's emerged in, we ended up in the book like having some different essays. They're not full chapters, but from people in other countries who are kind of talking about what's happening in their country. And the reason this happened was because I incidentally met someone from South Africa who knew a lot about DE&I, and she was working on that chapter. And she was talking, and we just ended up in a conversation about her saying this would really benefit a lot of students in South Africa because then like their teacher ratio is like 1 to 100 or something outrageous. In a lot of areas, there are hardly any teachers. And, that got me thinking, well, this whole book is really like US centric, or it was at the time, right? And we need to start kind of including. So when we talk about access too, I think this has the potential, again, not there because it's not even accessible everywhere. People need to figure out how to use it. It has the potential to bring education to a lot of places that doesn't already exist. And that speaks to me a little bit personally, because I mentioned at the beginning, I've been working to develop debate programs in other countries. And one of the hardest things we find to do is to get debate coaches to go to the other countries, because within the countries, it's a new thing to them. So there's not a lot of homegrown, talent, right? And then even if we can grow some even if we can grow some talent at home, right? Get some teachers, right? Like maybe you can imagine, hey, I'd be willing to work with the debate team, right? Like you're an early adopter, right? You still need to learn how to do it, right? And, when you're doing that on a mass scale, can that be helped to do online? Of course, but there's someone present. So I think there it has the potential to really grow. But I do fear, like in terms of kind of equity too, as you were talking about it earlier, it's like, we just hired somebody in our debate league, and knowing how to use this technology was in no way a criteria. Like this was like 6 weeks ago when we hired him, right? So it wasn't even like, well, hey, we got to put this in the job ad. But when he interviewed and he said, hey, and of course, I talk about this anyone who will listen to me. So he was forced to listen to me in the interview. So I brought it up. And he's talked about how he was using it in his school. He's currently a teacher. to use the technology to build his lesson plans. That was interesting. Okay, a lot of people. But also he said, well, I have some students at different levels, so I can take like a reading I want them to do and I'll adapt it, to their reading level. Yeah. Some of the kids are behind, right? But wow, this is, we have, and I'm viewing it through my lens. I'm thinking, wow, we really have to hire this person. And for me to think about, okay, what someone else would have to bring to the table, especially once the technology gets a little more advanced and some people become even more familiar with it, what someone would have to bring, similarly situated individual for the similar job would have to bring to the table if they didn't know how to use the technology versus someone who would, right? It does know how to do it. I would think, wow, like that person like automatically has an edge. They're going to be able to do what I think is higher quality work because I think it augments work, right? They're going to be able to do it faster, which means we're going to be able to get more done, whether it's producing more material for our debate teachers to use, or just that, wow, he would get this done faster and then be able to go work hands-on with like a new coach, right? And, have some stuff that's more engaging. So to me, it's like if kids aren't learning how to use these tools in school, that creates like a real tangible equality impact is maybe as soon as they're graduating already.
Yeah, I saw something online the other day, and it was talking about a prompt writer saying $500,000 a month or something like that for a prompt writer. So someone who is able to, for those people listening who, again, maybe don't know, a prompt is literally the question, not even a question, something like that. It's the dialect you would type into your ChatGPT, your generative AI, that can be ridiculously detailed in terms of what you want it to do, who you want it to be for, how long you want it to be. And you put this in and it will then spew out exactly what you want. I mean, I have an app, a Chrome extension on my ChatGPT. It's AI, is it RPM or PRM? And it's literally where people have created prompts and you can specify the one you want. You click on it, it's like, yep, and you can see how many people are using, how many hundreds of thousands of people use it or like it or whatever it's done. And they are pretty much geared to like SEO content. Right. It's geared towards blog writing, article writing, so marketing basically. And seeing a lot of people who are utilizing it for marketing. It's just what it's going to allow people to do.
Yeah, and I think that's a great example because that shows you, first of all, like, how new jobs are just going to like appear out of nowhere. It shows you how new jobs might go away. Like, I saw this interview with Sam Altman and he's like, right now you need to know exactly how to write a prompt, or, that benefits you. You can write a crappy one and get like, okay, right. But that's really benefits you. But he's like, hey, the goal here is for this all to be natural language. So like in 2 years, are we going to need prompt engineers? He's kind of like, hopefully not, because you're just going to be having a conversation, right? So you think, okay. And that reminded me when he said that, I remember seeing signs around the high school where I coached this debate team. There are all these signs. It's like, hey, learn to code. If you learn to code, then you're guaranteed a job, right? Like you don't, and I'd hear people say, oh, especially if you're from disadvantaged circumstances, start learning how to code. You can start immediately making money, even if you're 15. No. But now it's like, well, number of coding jobs is going to collapse, right? So there's going to be a lot of, as we go through this, there's going to be a lot of new jobs like prompt engineering, right? That the kind of kids need a little bit of training for. Are all those jobs going to stay? Like, no, we have prompt engineering. We might not need prompt engineers in 2 years. It's very hard to predict. Everyone thought we would need coders. Now we don't need any coders at all, right? Everyone thought this would come from AI, right, at a broad level, not just generative AI, but AI would come for the quote unquote the blue collar jobs, right? That those would all be done by the robots, and we started to see that, right? Even like the toll workers started to like disappear, right? You can check out more of your own at the grocery store, right? That started happening, but this generative AI, given that white collar people generate a lot of stuff. Generate a lot of knowledge, given this ability to generate a lot of knowledge, their jobs are really on the line, right? And it's going to take a little. First, companies have to start using the tools. They have to be comfortable using the tools, right? And then change has to happen. And maybe, unless you have a huge company, maybe you're just not going to start laying off a bunch of people. But I could definitely see saying, well, we don't need as many people. We don't, right? So somebody retires or leaves, you don't replace them.
No, you see it with on what I'd say almost like call centers, but on websites now in the bottom right hand corner. Those are literally they are chatbots, aren't they? And that they will speak to you and they can help in some way, shape, or form. I spoke with a company in India the other day about a chatbot and just what it takes, what can we do? Because I'm looking at it from a teaching perspective. It's like, when are we going to be at a point? Because every time you ask generative AI, right, why are you good for teaching? Why are you good for education? It's like personalization, personal tutor. Yeah. But actually, when you dive into that, what it talks about is you've got to be able to make a chatbot. You've got to be able to input the text, the information, the exam papers, everything you want. And then it will have the information, and then it will be a relative chatbot, like a personal tutor. But you've got to be able to put it in. You've got to be able to have that information to hand, input it, and gear it. It's not going to be long. It's not going to be long at all. So we talk about call centers or these people response times. It's like, it's all right. It's cheap enough to run a chatbot. It can respond to all these things. It can deal with all the problems if you give it the right information and guidelines to go through. That's one way it's going to go. And even then, like we talk about coding, I was listening to something else because I do like a podcast. I like listening and learning. But from a business side, the guy was talking about skill stacking or talent stacking. And where it's going to be, I've got a fly here around me. What it's going to be is you're going to imagine if you were someone like you hired someone, one, he was probably good at what he was doing, but then he had the other talent of, I know how to use ChatGPT. Imagine if you're a coder and you can use ChatGPT. And I've seen some of these videos on YouTube already. These guys who are coders are using Python and then are delivering courses on how you can integrate with ChatGPT and other things to make apps so easily. And people are providing you the code. So they're not using ChatGPT to generate the code. You're getting people go, look, you can now make things. You don't have to be a coder. Let me help you. I'm a proper coder. I can do it. So that talent stacking is what we're going to see, because if it does,
that's a good term. I hadn't heard that term before, but it makes a lot of sense. And it's not only a good term, but in terms of like, if you read the earlier stuff of like what AI can do, and obviously there's a little bit of a debate, but in terms of the idea of augmenting capabilities, that's a theoretical concept which is now playing out in what you just called talent stacking, right? It's making all those people, the person who built the original like code for like the Tesla, like the original kind of AI. I mean, it obviously doesn't work perfectly, right? But for the self-driving cars, said that like, this increases productivity by like 80%. So it's like you have an incredibly talented individual, right? There aren't too many people who can just, create AI code for a self-driving car, right? So this guy's kind of at the top of his game, right? And then he starts using this technology to improve his productivity by 80%. That's wicked scary, right? And in a good way, right? But
you're going to see it with every field, and then even for us, going back to the educational side of it,
right.
You imagine you've got someone. Most teachers should be, people listening, it's like you've got high-end pedagogy skills. I know about different lesson plans. I know all these things, and you can take that information and put it into ChatGPT. It's like what you'll get out from it. Say talking about. Differentiated or adapted work, like this colleague you hired is. If you know that and you put that in, the stuff you are going to come out with and be able to provide this personalization to students is super, super high end. But it kind of brings me to the part that worries me at the moment is general teachers' pedagogy. And what we see for you've been in the classrooms, but their knowledge and understanding of how students learn, how learning takes place, and the skills and strategies to really develop that. We were at a conference having a conversation the other week, and we said, we do our teacher training, we come in, come out, and we're then reliant on the institute we work at for our professional development. And we don't often get either the top-up courses of pedagogy and memory. And no, obviously there's a lot of talk at the moment about it being evidence informed and evidence research and education and what leads on things. Obviously there's no evidence, as we've said, about the impact of technology that this is going to have. But you put this in the hands of an average teacher, you're going to get average results. It's garbage in, garbage out, as I've been told with it. And actually what we need to look at first is upskilling teachers from a pedagogical level, and then develop them with the technology so that the output we get is actually a really high-end output that's going to have that huge impact that we all go, look, it's going to do this. It's like, no, it won't. If you put it in the hands of the wrong person, it will still give you rubbish.
There was someone on LinkedIn, who is an instructional designer who, I don't really know personally other than, kind of connected on LinkedIn and seeing what she posts. She said, one of the dangers is that, instructional design done well, like takes knowledge of like how to do it. And, we've learned a lot about how to design. Of course, it's always an imperfect science, but we've learned a lot about how the brain works, how students learn, all these kind of things. And a lot of the designs that, teachers kind of got like out of a book, right? Or, at least to varying degrees, like consistent with this. Now teachers could just design everything from like whole cloth. And she's like, that's kind of cool. Right. But we don't really know that it's really going to be done in the way that is consistent with instructional design principles. Now, she said, look, when I played around with it did work pretty well, right? Like it did usually kind of hit, but there's going to be a lot of stuff that's created and used that's, they're probably not really the best way to do it. Now, there's other values, right? Like, one thing teachers say, some people say teachers now can be a little less engaged because they're just told everything to teach and given all the materials. It's always a rub, right? Like teachers say, well, they're either, well, you want us to do too much stuff, we got to make all this stuff, right? And then they're like, but you just give us stuff and it's not that much fun to teach, right? There's always like a little bit of a rub. But I think in the education, the broader education space, and, you have that role that, I don't see as much, but like, how is it going to be producing effective lesson design? Is it going to be producing effective materials? Especially if that's not always on your mind, right? Like you say, you learn about it in education school, you get some professional development, but what happens in school is always sometimes random. Somebody comes in and, the principal or their school director meets somebody cool, has an idea, so they bring them in for professional development, right? And, we don't really know what to do with it when, oh, that's kind of interesting, but what do I do with this when it's over? And then it gets forgotten about but yeah, with all this, just even learning how to use the tools and like what they're for, or you talk about a more engaged teacher, less engaged. I did a little demo the other day with Bing, which I put on the internet that just kind of said like, hey, this is how you right in within the Bing browser, you could create an assignment, a lesson plan. You could, you could create a basic rubric, right? I didn't even think, oh, is this a good rubric or not? But I created a basic rubric, and then I had to evaluate the paper based on the rubric and provide feedback. And I thought it did a pretty good job of evaluating based on the rubric and providing feedback. But, someone posted actually last night before I fell asleep, so I didn't have a chance to respond. He said, well, are you really saying this like should replace teachers? Because I made a different post. And he's like, other than to do a quiz. And I would say, hey, look, I do not at all believe this should replace teachers, right? I believe that they could use this as a starting point. But actually, to be honest with you, it gave pretty good feedback, right? And it even noticed, I did two different papers. It noticed like one of the papers I wrote, I intentionally left out all the citations. I noticed I didn't have them. And the other one I only put in 2. It said, well, you only have 2 of the 5. Like it noticed what was there and what was not. But the question to like kind of get at your point is like, would a lot of teachers just say, hey, this is like pretty good. Like, I'm good with this. Or would they then say, well, the 5 minutes or 10 minutes I would have taken for each student essay, I'm now going to start with that feedback and build on it. I'm still going to spend that same amount of time, right, that I would have spent improving, like using this as a foundation, using this as a rough draft, or am I just going to roll with this?
Yeah, productivity that you mentioned, that's a big thing. I think in the world of education right now, and it's been there for a while, but everyone I've spoken to that's here, or again, different countries, be it Australia, be it back in the UK, have all talked about teachers leaving the profession because of burnout, workload, stress, all these other things. And I think that the hope, the great hope, as it were, for AI in education is that it can go some way to diminish and reduce teacher workload. Like if I can produce the same lesson plan or the idea of a lesson or a quiz or this and everything else, all the different parts that come into it, and I can do that in 30 minutes rather than 2 hours, because that's a huge saving in time. That's 75%. It's almost 80% productivity that we talked about. Right. And that's the thing for teachers. That really is a huge thing. So, but I want to move on a little bit because you've dropped this hint about the book a few times. So tell us, because it kind of aligns to then how we got into this. Tell us about the book.
So we just finished editing. I say we because there were 4 editors. And I think in total 32 authors. Occasionally I'd have to go back and keep, recount because we have so many. Kind of wrote a book about generative AI. Specifically, we mentioned some other uses here and there to the extent that they impact generative AI in education. Where did it come from? So back in early January, I was chatting with a former student of mine who I've done some technology projects with. He actually built a large framework for kids to keep debating during the pandemic. And this was used in April of 2020, right after it started. But anyhow, we were still using this for a different purpose. Pandemic is over, but we were having an online debate tournament, and we were just chatting. And he had started doing some work on this. He's a computer person in his own work, and I had started reading about it. And I said, there's really just a lot of interest, but a lack of knowledge. We should really organize some kind of a webinar. So in 10 days, we got some people to speak, mostly our friends, but also a few people that I met on LinkedIn who were posting about these things. And in about 10 days, we organized this webinar, and part of it was like, okay, we had the topics, we need to organize it. And then we advertised it for about 3 days. 200 people registered, 100 people showed up. The webinar went on for 2.5 hours. It was only supposed to be 90 minutes, but 50 were still left at the end. So we thought, wow, maybe we should just organize a book. And our original idea was that, hey, let's just take the ideas that are here. Let's get these written out. Of course, with technologies now, you could spit them out in text and spend a little time editing. And we were just going to kind of publish a short book with their ideas. But then as I got to meet more people and so many more ideas came out of this, a lot of people got involved. And so we ended up with all these authors, and it's kind of organized like, how it's organized into sections. There are so many chapters, right? Like, what is this? Like, how does it work? Basically, how do you prompt? And then some of the different positive ways it can impact education, because again, a lot of it's been banned. So there's a little bit of that spin. Then there's all the practical uses of it. Then we have different sections on how it's being utilized in different countries. And, there's a big difference in some countries, and how they've kind of adopted it in their take. And then we have an appendix, a huge appendix with like just different, we have an interview with a teacher who has like 140 students that she teaches during the year, and at least a third of them she believes are using this like inappropriately, and her struggles with that. And it's just a wild. I met her, that's how it ended up in there, and it was a wild conversation and a read. It just shows a real life struggle. I mean, we're kind of like, yeah, but like, could you imagine living this, right? Like, and not really knowing how to manage it. And, she said, oh, I had heard about that, but, I started Googling it, right? So she's in the middle of this crisis, trying to solve it through conventional means, doing her best to like learn about the technology. Right. So it's kind of like, it'd be like almost like if you didn't know what the internet was and you realize kids can copy or pasting somewhere and you're trying to figure out like where they're copying and pasting from. Right. Right. So, so that, and then the idea of a book, a couple of people asked me, even a couple of people asked it, right. They said, well, why don't you just post this in like places on the internet? So there's tons of stuff on places on the internet. I said, teachers don't have a lot of time. Most teachers don't read LinkedIn, which is where I think actually some of the best stuff is. Right. So it needs to be consolidated. And it needs to be like stuff that, we have obviously current materials through the last couple of weeks, but it needs the stuff that's going to kind of stand the, not forever, but it needs to be like a viable product for a couple of years. So there's a lot about, hey, this is where it's going. This is where it is. But the idea is to consolidate all in one place. It's 665 pages in online. And it's like, we're finishing up a Wednesday. I think, the print ordering will be available. It's around 960 pages in print, but it covers everything from like, my sister used to be a first grade teacher. She runs this early learning innovation academy to like how a first grade teacher can use it. And it's written in a very like conversational style where she imagines like, herself as the teacher who knows how to use it. Another teacher who's like, this other teacher a new teacher keeps asking her for like, oh, I left my lesson plan on the photocopier and the principal wants it tomorrow. And, she just flips them over a lesson plan, right, that she generates, on the chat GPT, all the way to, including special ed, which is a great place for adaptations to high school science. We have people using it at the university level who are integrating it. We have another friend of mine who done a lot of stuff with college admissions, how you can use this to help you in your college admissions. We had a lawyer talk about how he's using it in his career, which I think hopefully motivates schools a little bit to say, when I talked to him early on, I had just posted something and he read it and he messaged me. He said, he's like, he's like, I really agree with you. He said, I've been using this in my legal work for 2 years. He's not ChatGPT, but he said some of the commercial applications. He said, I do appellate work and I've been using this as a rough draft of my writing. And then I finish writing what I want to send in. And I'm thinking, well, if he can use this, if it's good enough for him, it's good enough for like a 7th grader to start with, right? Like, right. The teachers, a lot of people are like, well, there's like an error. That's the other thing that really shocked me. A lot of people would post like, well, I did this thing and like this one thing is wrong. It's like, what kind of student work are you getting? Like everything all the students turn in, any advice you get from a friend, anything you find on the internet, it's always right. Like, the FDA approved drugs that have the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. They're like 90% effective. They say the humans basically can detect with like 85% reliability whether something is like kind of accurate or not, even when we know it's accurate or not. But that's another story. But the idea of the book was to get like all the essential knowledge like in one place. And there's other things that I've now learned are even more essential for people to understand, just like how an LLM works. And that's in the book, but I'm saying then once you break it down, like what are, a few of the core things that people probably need to understand, that's one of them. But that's the idea behind the book. And we wanted to get it out quickly because we knew that, people need to start learning about this.
Yeah, they do. I mean, what are we now? The 7th, we're recording this on the 7th of April and you had it done when did you start? January?
Yeah, we started I think the webinar was like on January 18th. So we tell you about the book. We basically decided to do it then. Now I was a little too ambitious. I wanted to have it out by February 18th. I said, come on. I said, we have different authors. I said, everyone just needs to write, I said, just basically write about what they talked about and get it written. And, the idea, some of the chapters turned out to be regular chapters or even longer. But originally I was thinking, around like 3,000, 3,500 words. I said, come on. I said, I can give you a transcript of what you said if you want to help edit it. But then we started finding other people and, it kind of took on a little bit life of its own. So it actually took about 2 months to get it out. So,
and it's almost as long as Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, it's quite long. Yeah, it's quite. But look, there are a lot. Like I said, there are a lot of different ideas, and I think people are gonna, the people want to take different parts out of it. Like if you're a university professor and you're working on your acceptable use policy, there's a whole chapter about that, and you'll probably read the stuff about how other universities are using it. Maybe some stuff about high school. You're going to read the chapter on like how a first grade teacher should use it. Probably not, right? So like, and there's there's a lot of different parts in the book, and I think if you're like, if I were a superintendent of a school, I'd probably want to read the whole book. You know what I mean? It kind of depends on a little bit where you sit and what you. Or if you don't know anything about it, then you maybe read one chapter at a time, kind of slowly. Maybe on the weekend, read about what generative AI is and how LLMs work. If you knew all that after the weekend was over, that's a great start, right?
I think that's it. Like one of the sort of our connection, with sort of Leon Furs is our sort of mutual connection via LinkedIn, isn't it? Right. Because when I spoke with him, he mentioned that he'd written a chapter for the book that had started originally from a blog, and then it obviously evolved into a full blown sort of essay or chapter part for it. And he talked about obviously the ethics behind it and policy sustainabilities. And when you mentioned then about how it works, that actually now is coming more to the forefront for people. Like we see Italy banned it. And when you look at people go, oh, why? And you look at then the rationale behind it. If you really look at the rationale, it's like, actually that makes sense. Until you can identify how you are harvesting the data and managing it safely and securely, as well as then, as Leo mentioned, the sustainability and the amount of energy that goes into running and doing all these things. It's the idea of the gloss on top looks far too good, and now people are coming around to the idea of, so that book is almost sounds like at some point it's going to be referred to as the Bible of AI for all sorts.
Thanks. Well, I think and the Italy thing is interesting, and as we go into print, that's one of the things we want to cover. At first, say that why do we need in a book we want to have last for a long time? Why do we need this chapter on Italy? Well, it introduces. It kind of, in a way, encapsulates, we talk about the discriminant. And, it's interesting, in the discrimination side, we talk about how it's discriminatory. In the same chapter, also, though, talk about how it can be used positively in DI, because there's a lot of stuff going on in artificial intelligence and related to that about DEI. But, we talk about that. Then we talk about, like, the privacy issues in different parts of the book. We talk about, the environmental effects. And this is and I think in some way it encapsulates the fact that this is a whole new thing, right? This isn't like another app that we can decide to. It isn't like an app, and now that they kind of made it, and it's an app like what's on the web, but with other people. But there's apps with it. It is in a sense, but it's not just another thing you can use. It's like a whole other way of like relating. Like Bill Gates just said, it said now we have the AI world, and I think that's true, right? And how we're going to relate and manage the AI world. That's interesting. And different countries are going to, of course, bring different values. I mean, I think it's really, there's a lot of research. We're talking about productivity, for example, right? And we kind of threw out like the isolated examples of like 80%, right, at the high end. Even the low end, a lot of, there's a paper published by two professors at MIT, right? And data is limited, obviously, but it's a real study, right? It's not like two people who just kind of thought, and and they found like it was like 17 to 30% increases in productivity across professions, right? And it's like, okay, so Italy is willing to say like we're willing to swallow a productivity loss to protect our privacy, because a lot of what they're saying is privacy, right? Which shows you how valuable privacy is in their culture. Like the US, I think people think privacy is important, but there's 170 million of us using TikTok. Like, and I don't know enough technically to compare the privacy violations that are occurring in TikTok versus the ones that are occurring in the, in Chat GPT, and like what the meaningful difference is. But to me, that it really just brings up a lot of questions, right? Like, how do we value these competing things? Because they are competing values. Like, it is a reality. We don't know exactly how much, and it's going to vary by profession, how much this increases productivity. Productivity is a very important marker of an economy, right? Like, so are you willing to swallow that, right, to protect privacy, which, being violated in other ways? But like, to me, I almost kind of answer my own question, because I just say like privacy as if I'm not concerned, but some people care a lot about it. And that is something that didn't unpack to me in my mind. There was a confluence of two things, right? One of the authors who I met on LinkedIn, she's posting these things about like, designing schools. She's designing schools, principles of universal design in schools, which I didn't understand. When I first spoke to her, it actually took the second conversation. She was polite. I thought, well, this would be great to include in the book, because we're going to have to, I'm like, this needs to be designed into schools, right? And, I think that's the first conversation. She was like, okay. And then she goes, you really, I don't know if she used the word backwards, but she's basically, you have this backwards, right? Universal design starts with the end user, that if it's a business, like it's the person using the product. If it's a school, it's a student, right? And she had done this huge project, right? But that got me thinking more. And the more we talked about, this needs to start. This isn't like a tool for like us to manage. Well, it has become that, like, manage in the fact that we have to deal with it. It needs to be it's like a tool that we should use. My hammer doesn't control what I do. I control what my hammer does. And I think, so part of it was part of coming out of, these conversations with her. Part of it was also like seeing what now being written on LinkedIn and a lot of other places about how this is a tool for humans, and it has to be used in a way that benefits humans. So if humans think their privacy is really important, regardless of what it can do, it should only be used in a way that like minimizes, so to speak, privacy violations, right? So those discussions about humanity are really, really important, because it's a life-changing thing. It's going to change the world, right? Like, we can debate how much or how long it's going to take, or what the change is going to be, but it's going to change the world. And the education is a big part of the world. And the other thing, the other kind of thought I had, as it really hit me, is that, so a business, right? Either whether it's in business internally or you're producing a product externally, you're generating material, and you want somebody to consume that. And essentially, if you're a business, the value of your product is determined by how many people consume it, how many people find the end product valuable. Well, in education, we ask students to produce material, not so much to get to the end product, right? Like, I've been in debate so long, I want students to become better debaters. I don't ask them to produce speeches and rebuttals so I can learn something new about a topic. Like, no offense to them, but if I want to learn something new about the topic, I can go read about it. Like, they're like sometimes 14, 15, right? They're learning how to do this. So it's the process. It's not the end product, right? But we kind of assume as educators, whether it's in my narrow space or elsewhere, if there's a good final product, the students have learned, right? Like that product is a demonstration of their abilities. And maybe in some instances, that's a false assumption. You can debate all the learning science and all that. But like, generally speaking, we think if there's a good final product, the students have learned, right? They've learned the content. They've learned how to think about it. But now you can see there's this huge emerging gap, right? We want industry that what they care about is the final product in most instances. They don't care about the process unless it's an employee training program. They only care about the end product and how valuable it is. As educators, we can't only care about the end product because something else other than a student can create that end product, right? And the better the technology gets for industry at creating the end product, the more of a struggle, the more pressure it puts on educators. There's been a lot of technology changes. There have been a lot of changes in the world that don't really impact education. Now, we could say that, well, gee, we should have adapted education more because these products like impact the world our students are going to live in. But they didn't, as educators, really impact us. These advances directly impact one of the primary assessment tools, right? These products are going to have to impact like how we teach and how we assess. Whether in my instance it's changing how I teach debate, maybe making some arguments for how we should have different events that reward different skills, right? And that's unpacked a little bit in the chapter. But there's no avoiding, given the way we currently assess students, there's no way of avoiding this having a dramatic impact on education.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think every country, like you're in the American education system, which is to some extent is very different, let's say, from the UK national curriculum and the UK curriculum, and we have A-levels and GCSEs where it's end exams. So A-levels at the moment, we are probably about 6 weeks, give or take, from what I call exam season starting. So year 11, so our 16-year-olds, 15, 16-year-olds, and then the A-level students, 17, 18-year-olds will go and be examined in their 2-year courses. So it's one of those things where there are, and again, debatable, some teachers sit on the fence, some are very strongly opposed to it in terms of the benefit of exams. But when you bring into you bring into the mix what is AI and how it can have an impact on coursework, you kind of get a lot of teachers and educators going, however much I may dislike exams, end of year exams, it's almost at a point where it's the only true vindication and validation of what do my students know. And even at its best, it's not really a case of what they know. It's how good you are on that day. And so it throws up a lot of questions, a lot of what ifs, and also this idea of what do we do with exams? Because different countries, different systems, different ways of assessing or examining. But at least everyone sits the same exam. If I want to compare, I'm a university and I want to, let's say, as a science, you're going to come in and do biology. Well, I can then look across all the biology exams and go, well, there's no way you could have used AI to impact the outcome of your exam unless you're using it to learn, unless you have systems and skills being metacognitive to help it support your learning, because you can't use it in the exam. And it's where a lot of teachers are thinking AI is going to change that. AI is going to revolutionize, get with the exam boards. Why would an exam board change? They make so much money from these exams, and at least they can say they're consistent. What we do in class with it, that's going to massively change because we want to reinforce skills. We want to reinforce learning and make our students, successful learners and understand our topics. But when it comes to an examination, I can't see exam boards and governments going, yeah, we need to change the exams. It's like, you can't cheat on them.
Yeah, if anything, it'll reinforce. It's interesting because if anything, it'll reinforce kind of the value of an exam-based approach, right? Now, you think of that, it reinforces the value of an exam-based approach in terms of like learning the content, right? Now, but I think what it doesn't reinforce, which I think is an open question that I struggle to articulate a little bit or have any answers to, and I think people within their own fields need to think about this, right? Like science and, writing especially, right? Like, what is it in this world? Do students need this? Do students need the same? Well, do students need the same knowledge they did in the non-AI world, right? That we lived in. And right, okay, and you're shaking your head no, right? So it's like if they don't, if that's right, your guidance little mind too, right? Then okay, the exam can test knowledge, but is it testing knowledge that they no longer need? And I don't think it's absolutely yes or no. It's not like students don't need to learn any. Everyone still needs foundational knowledge, right? If I ask you, well, gee, what's 4 + 7? You shouldn't have to say, well, let me check my calculator, right? Like, right? I say, what is this? If I ask an adult, my kid, what does this word mean? They shouldn't say, well, go look it up every single time, right? So I think people need some foundational knowledge, but do they need as much? And I think this gets really interesting. There's a Harvard professor I was listening to, he's been working in AI since the 1950s. And he kind of brought up the point that, AI we know that AI can do well on basic standard assessment. It gets ChatGPT-4 got 5 on almost every AP exam. It got like a couple 4s, and only in English did it like perform poorly. It got like a 2 or 3. It got the 1460 on the SAT. It's pretty well. And he kind of is trying to articulate this idea that what we assumed was that if a university, right, and just take Harvard for an example, right, the one like, most people want to get into, right, like, okay, if you have this really high SAT score and you have these like really high AP scores, then you're going to come here and you're going to flourish. And you're going to flourish because we're trying to train you for the roles of the future. And the roles of the future, whatever they are, whatever you end up being, like, in your profession, if you can get a 4, if you can get a 5 on these AP exams, if you can get, like 1460 or above, like on the SAT, then you're going to be able to do well in Harvard, and you're going to be able to do well, like in your career. Now, when we have all new careers, okay, does somebody who is kind of maybe, and this did need more study of brain science and learning and stuff like that and our capacities. Does someone who has the capacity to get a 14, 16 above on the SAT and 5 on a lot of their AP exams, is the person with that mental capacity? Are those men like, excuse me, we think we think of that as all the mental capacity. If that's one type of mental capacity, right, as we learn more, right? Is it somebody, though, in the future with a different type of mental capacity that's going to really succeed, right? And the one kind of contrasting, one thing I pulled out is like, because a lot of people say like, hey, kids still need to learn how to write the 5-paragraph essay, which has just become this reference point for writing essays or not writing essays, right? But I say, if this was 1850, do you think learning how to write a 5-paragraph essay would be a valuable skill for your life? Like, no way, right? Everyone works in agriculture, right? So if you just say that, like, what we're teaching in kids now and the skills we're developing now, and in the type of what we define as intelligence that's valuable now, if those intelligences, if the activities that require those type of intelligences can be performed by machines, which appears that they can, then what are we doing? We're training students to do what machines can do better than us, right? So what other things do we start to need to? We don't have any answers to that, right? But like, imagine we're going back to 1850. What do we now need to train students to do instead of write a research paper?
Yeah, I think it boils back to some of the things you said, what we discussed earlier about talent stacking. A kid's going to come and take GCSE biology, go on to take A-level biology. So all of a sudden you've stacked on it that foundational knowledge. It's like, right, I've gone up another level. You go to university, it's like, right, you take higher order biology. So you're now at university level biology. It could be medicine, biochemistry, whatever it may be. You go off into industry, you start working with technology. So you stack on top of that. So you now got this foundational knowledge of biology, biochemistry, and you bring in technology to it. It's like, you're going to get to a point where you need these individuals with all these skills and talents stacked to get to a point where the machines that we're talking about, that, in 50 years, and I think it's already happening now, but I wouldn't be surprised, less than 50 years, surgery all be done by machines.
Right.
Because why wouldn't it be? You could,
right. Humans are fallible. Right?
You input all the information. You can input every part of information you need. They know equally as much. They're more precise. Right. They don't get tired. All these are the things that can come into it, but you still need the human element there. You still need the person with the foundational knowledge that's stacked on top to be able to program, to run it, to fix it, and actually step in case something does go wrong.
Yeah, of course. Right.
And it's going to be that. So it's an interesting one, because I'm a huge advocate of skills. I think skills are the way forward, over necessarily content, but content has a place. And you look at, like, even now, my kids, funnily enough, when you mentioned earlier, I was born in 1984, just so when you were in school learning about that. And, I started this podcast this year. There's things I do with videos, which my students assume are a young person's game. And so when you say, I can edit videos, I run a podcast, I can use technology, I've got this, they're amazed. It's like, you learned that in the last year or so, last couple of 5 years. Yeah. It's like, what, adults can learn things as well? Yeah. Yeah. Of course we can. The YouTube technology, all these things are helping to learn, and they find that amazing. But that's skills. It's things like resilience, creativity, all the things that we talk about that they need developing, not just being able to sit and absorb information like a sponge. And that for me, in terms of a curriculum, about a British curriculum as well, is what's frustrating. It's because it's so content heavy. It doesn't give them what we would consider like prerequisite skills for certain things. Whereas other courses, even the IB does more, and other courses in America does, STEAM subjects generally do. But things, like you say, have changed. I think go back 20, 25 years. And when I was in school, can you rewire a plug? Yeah, I could do then. Now, kids don't know. You change a tire. Can you fix a puncture on your bike? All these things, like, we seem so silly, but actually they're still required skills.
Yeah. And I think like you say, the foundation, and I think it can break down by grade level. Like, I don't really know that, I think first graders still need to learn how to read and write sentences. Yeah. Right. But, if you're a college student, if you're enrolled in a college program, learning how to be a technical writer, I don't really know that there's a job for you. Right. Maybe there's a job for a couple of you who are overseeing all the technical writing that's happening in a company. Right. But, the foundational skills, like, you could probably think more of the sciences. Right. Like, there's a lot of, I'm glad I learned, basic biology and basic chemistry. Right. And all these things. Do I use them now? No. But, like, they're important to know. Right. Like, if I talk to the doctor or something, like, I know basically how the body works, how animals function. Right. Like, so, but, what foundational knowledge do we still need? At what level do we need to learn it? I'm in this writing group. Dr. Laura Demin, she's one of the authors, and she started this Facebook group for writing professors, which obviously were really impacted by this. And it has like 2,000 writing professors in there, right? And they're all, some of them, very like interested in, like herself, teaching the students how to use the technologies. Others, some were completely opposed. One even said, it made me think about it when you brought that up, and, the employee training and those kind of things. She said, well, when they go work for these companies, it's their job to teach them how to use these technologies. Like, it's my job to teach them essentially how to write like the research paper. Right. So, but it's interesting. And, I see that. Right. And obviously what you learn, in a lot of industries, you learn as I'm in this office complex, and yesterday there was a training it appeared new employees to learn how to go out and fix things, right? Like, you're showing them like how to thread, right? Everything. You don't learn that in school necessarily. So there's different ways that learning happens in society, right? Like, and there's different levels, there's different grade levels of learning. But I think that all needs to be rethought. You mentioned earlier about like, can all this be rethought, from the top down? One of the authors I spoke to, wrote a law professor who wrote the chapter about like, different potential legal implications for schools. She said, well, do you think the like New York State, she's from New York, do you think they'll like rewrite all the education like standards? I was like, well, maybe someday, but these things don't change that quickly, right? So you have technology that was dropped onto schools in the middle of the academic year. Even just the idea that like, we're going to change learning standards and education for a state. Like, just the process alone would probably take a year, right? Let alone like a radical change. It's like probably not going to happen. So in some ways, private schools are a little better. They still have to comply with government requirements and all those kind of things, but they usually have a lot more flexibility to, kind of innovate, within that, right? That's why they're private schools, right? So, I think you'll see some more of the innovations come out of that, but I think that'll create a gap. But like, so when you're like the department in science, right? Is that like all the sciences? Like, what are your, I guess, I don't know. Like, I feel like you're the podcaster. You're supposed to ask the questions, but
you can ask questions. It's fine.
How have you, and, I don't know if you still teach any classes, but how have you as a teacher, like, what have you done with this? Or like, what are you thinking about as a leader in the sciences in your school? Like, what conversations have you had with other teachers?
I'll be honest with you, very, very little. Like, I'm an early, in terms of the conversations wise, I've put it out there, but no, even in ours, Dubai, there's a handful of teachers, early adopters, or people that say, I've heard of it, but I've not had a chance to really do anything with it yet. I don't know what to do with it. I use it. I've been using it all holiday. Like, I use it consistently. whether that's now looking at ChatGPT or Bing. I can't get onto Bard. It's not allowed in my country. I don't have access to it. So I'll wait for that one, which
You're
is
not
weird.
missing anything yet. I think you might be, I think they're going to come back. Some people say they have advanced neural networks. But
for me, I've seen more students. I've seen more of my students use AI than probably than staff. And it's now a case, because they all use Macs, they all use Google Chrome. And actually, even though we are an Office 365 school, they don't use Edge or what they need to get onto Bing. So I've got Chrome and I've also got Edge installed. So I'll have the two of them open because I'll use Bing quite frequently. I love the DALL-E interface with Bing and creating images. I like some of the new components it has up there, in terms of its ability. I can't remember what the correct term is, but there's the chat section. There is the create kind of thing for you, where you can do the paragraphs.
I don't get precisely the differences, but you can play with them.
I like it because it comes out with the quote. It comes out with the references. It has all that information there. So I use it a lot. I use it a lot to ideation and come up with ideas. And then you still have to take it and do something with it. I still have to take it and put it into a PowerPoint or a Word document or something else. So there's still, it might give information and start the process. You still then have to go with that. You still got another 50% of the way to go. It's all you start with is an idea. So for me at the moment, I'm looking to push through training in my school. In fact, this holiday, I've just in the process of finishing writing a very simple beginner's course on sort of like an introduction of ChatGPT for educators. Like it's just a 3-lesson course, as it were, that people can use to go, right, this is what it is. How do I get started using it?
Yeah, that's what I'm doing too, right? There's a lot of it they don't know, like what, even in the book, I was like, the first thing is like, what is generative AI? And it's kind of short, but I was like, some people don't know. Like some people might buy this book because, how could we not say what it sounds weird, but like, nowadays, if you bought a book about the internet, you wouldn't start by explaining what the internet is, right? right. But you kind of have to here, right? We just kept it short. Like here's some examples, it generates some text. You can also use it for this other things. And then we went into how it works.
Yeah. But for me, I'll openly admit, it's like, I'm not a great writer. And even in terms of script writing for YouTube, podcasting, in terms of, I will ideate ideas and then I'll put them through, ChatGPT or Bing and go, right, can you improve this for me?
Right. Yeah.
And because that's what it's there for. Therefore it improves the quality of my output. So I still have to ideate, come up with these things, and then take them and go, actually, that doesn't sound very good. I need to reword this, retweak it. It's to say it still has a human element to it. Whereas school-wise, like there's a lot of teachers, again, like I said earlier, who are still struggling with the concept of technology, or in terms of, right, how do I use the basic apps that are out there like Neopod or Formative, or all these ones that allow you to do
that are meant to be. They were designed and redesigned iteratively to be made for teachers to use as easily as possible, but they're still
but still don't, or things like that, or how they just general technology. And then we've kind of taken it another step on. We've gone past now this idea of just technology in terms of AI. And the fact is, it's not really, like, if you break it down, and maybe my view of it is, it's not a technology. It's not like you've got to figure something out, how it works, or how can I integrate this in. No, you don't have to do that. You just have to use it as a resource, because that's what it is. It is a resource. You have it open. You think, right, I'm planning this. I'm just going to ask, right, can you do this for me? And so the biggest thing is developing your language or prompts. You do that, and you have it.
And that's the whole idea. That's why I exploded, because it's a natural language interaction, right? Like,
exactly.
And I even talked to Lori Mazer, who did our book art, and she's been doing a lot with Midjourney for a year. Which, if you've seen these images, are incredible. But it really hit me that they released this last July in beta. It's not even a year old. And she said, "Look, you really used to have to to use this, really know all like the details, like all the prompts and all the commands." She said, now just like basically like other than hitting like the / create and typing it in, now it can get you pretty far. Now she told me how she made some of the images in the book, like synthesizing different ones and stuff. So I was okay, that's like next level. But, the more and more this kind of becomes a natural conversation, then you can start thinking of it as like an idea generator, like you were just talking about, as a partner. Like, oh, I have this idea. right? What's your, I'm trying to do X. What's your idea for how I can get there? Well, actually I have this idea. Why? Like, what do you think about this idea? Like, how could you make this better? Like, what are some ways to, like, I could break this down this sounds kind of high level, but, I'm working with like 12-year-olds. Like, can you like break this down for me, you know?
ChatGPT itself, it says, use me as a teaching assistant. And in terms of either supporting the students or assisting me in terms of what I'm doing. So it's just getting your head around that in terms of what you want it to do for you. Like you said, I like the analogy of the hammer. I'm holding it and I'll dictate what it does. Therefore,
I don't want it to hit me on the head. I'm taking control of this hammer, right?
And it's the same with the AI. You're in control of it. How you use it. If you can use it effectively, just learn. It's more, I think, now a case of learning to use it. And anytime I've used it around, people in my school, leadership in my school, they just look amazed. It's like, it's just a resource. You just learn how to use it properly. And what you get out from it is great, or could be great, as it were.
Yeah, my friend Anand, he's one of the co-editors. He said he had a department meeting in his university, and they kind of reached like some different decisions about like how to do things. So they were crafting an email to send out to everyone. And he said he used a ChatGPT, and it basically just said what he wanted. And it basically wrote all the email, and he put it up on the screen or whatever. And he said even a lot of the doubters were like, okay. He said, we allocated like a half hour to, come up with our out-facing communications. He's like, I basically had it done in like 5 minutes.
Yeah. Productivity, like we said. So, Stefan.
And who's going to be upset they have to leave a meeting early because we're done, right?
No one, exactly.
Then everybody's happy.
Do now. Zooms, Google Meets. That's do it from home. So
anyway. Dude, it's easier to get people to come to meetings now on time, right?
Exactly.
People just show up. So
I want to wrap this up. But talking about the book, we've not actually said about where people can find it, how they can order it. So we can close on that.
The easiest way to order it is just go to Amazon, and you can type in the title, or you could type in my name. And it will come up, and you, like I say, right now you can order it. It's on Kindle, and hopefully on Wednesday or sometime this upcoming week, it will be available in print. So in print, it's probably going to be a bit expensive just because it's 950 pages. But I do encourage you. I really appreciate the compliment that kind of thought of it as the Bible. It is comprehensive. It covers a lot of things. It has a lot of different ideas in there, and the idea is to get a lot of different ideas. It's not. There's a little bit of I'll admit, a little bit of an optimistic side, but part of that side exists because, schools banned it. So part of it is like, I don't think we need to write another chapter about like why we should ban this technology. Maybe some schools will still come to that decision about why they should ban it. But the chapters that we have about why, we've been talking about like how it's going to be used in careers. There's a chapter about like critical thinking. We really hope that schools really think about like the benefits this can produce for like the schools and for the students and like why they need it. And that's there. And then there's a lot of implementation to how to use it. We try to expose the audience as to how it's being used in, different countries, like in the UAE, it's being used a lot. I interviewed a school head I knew from Vietnam, and they're like super excited about it. And, it was interesting with the public-private school thing. She said, we have a lot more opportunities to innovate, but then we're going to work with the public schools. We're kind of like the guinea pigs. Right, like what worked, and she said the government's really behind it, those types of things. So I tried to we try to include a lot of perspectives, and it's really helpful to think about how it actually works in education. Like I say, I've coached debate like within the K-12 framework. We've developed debate in K-12 schools, but one of the editors, she's recently retired. She was a science teacher, she was an English teacher, she was a school technology specialist, she was the curriculum instructional superintendent they have in the United States, and then was the interim superintendent before she retired. So she knows everything inside and out about the K-12 educational system, and she edited the section on like K-12. And having her think about, as a partner, right, like to think about like what these technologies mean for like teachers and how they can be used and like what they can be used for, was invaluable. So we're really proud of the book. We're really excited. I really appreciate you having me on this podcast. As you know, I can go on and on and on about about all these issues. I've given them a lot of thought, and it's nice to talk to you about just getting reactions from teachers and stuff that you're working with. So I don't know. It's been exciting, and I think maybe a year from now, we could, maybe if I get lucky, we can do this again. And I think the conversation will hopefully be different. We'll be talking. All our conversation will be about how it's being used, not whether or not it should be used. Right.
I would look forward to that. I'll hold you to it. 2024,
okay,
7th of April. Stefan, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your insights. And I look forward to. I don't know if I'll order it, just in terms of it'll probably cost weight too much in terms of trying to ship it to the UAE. But Kindle version, go out if you are at all interested in AI and want to, really upskill yourself and your knowledge base. It's I'd highly recommend going out and getting a copy.
Yeah, and then I should mention it has probably 500 or 600 additional sources in there. The editor's introduction is 30 pages and has 150 references. So you don't have to just learn from us; you can learn from everybody.
Exactly.
So, thanks again.
Thanks ever so much for coming on. Really appreciate your time today, Stefan. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the International Classroom Podcast. I hope that our discussion has provided you with some valuable insights and perspectives on education from around the world. If you've enjoyed this episode, subscribe on your favorite streaming platform to stay up to date on our latest episodes. If you've got any feedback or any comments or suggestions for future topics, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach out to us on our website or on our social media channels. Remember, guys, education is a lifelong journey, and we're excited to continue exploring the world of education with you. So don't forget to subscribe, and we will see you in the next episode of the International Classroom.